Ooh, I'm just going to sit here in silence for a minute, apparently, waiting for too long. I am Mr. Technological Master Brad Chester, the oldest man in 40K. And I have Sean Dice with Rice with me, who is currently having internet problems. So he's on his handy dandy Pantex Nokia phone.
Exactly.
And we're going to make this work. Welcome to Deal With It. We're talking today about the World Eaters, the Eater of Worlds, the Red Angel. And we're going to rock this out. Let's start off with the basics for Deal With It as usual. Preparation, my favorite. Getting ready, figuring things out. Preparation is really the key to making your games easier in all tournaments, no matter what faction you're playing with. So it's a very big deal. And then we go down to the specifics, identifying strengths and weaknesses. From those strengths and weaknesses, making a plan, practicing, and making adjustments going hand in hand. Thank you. Appreciate that, Wolf. So, we're going to talk about, and as usual, we have a sick comment. Yeah, whatever. I said my brain hurt today. Blood for the Blood God, Skulls for the Skull Throne, Death to the False Emperor. Well said from the poet Angron. So, he does throw down, like, actual mojo on this one. Courage is fighting the kingdom which enslaves you no matter what their armies, no matter that their armies are yours by 10,000 to 1. Talking mad shit.
Yeah, and that'll get more important as we go on, because as a World Eaters player, you have got to, be at peace with the fact that violence is usually the answer, but how you do it is important. Keep in mind, sometimes you can be the demon primarch, and sometimes you can be the very empathetic strategic general of human Angron. And you will definitely need to do that to win all your games with World Eaters.
100% on this. In the preparation of this, we're going to talk about combos and things, but we do have to talk about I want to throw this out there before we even go any farther. We're going to say this multiple times today. Being an aggressive list does not just mean the YOLO swag every time. It's a big deal a lot of times to just have the threat of the fact that you can YOLO swag, the fact that you can go up. Controlling the board is a huge deal in 40K, scoring your points and having the ability to get up there and get personal. A lot of times will make your opponent turtle up, and then you don't need to run out and get them. You'll just win.
Exactly, and Brad hit the nail on the head. This particularly Deal With It will be similar to orcs, but not exactly the same. So even if you are an orc player and you are looking for advice, we specifically have a Deal With It on orcs, but for World Eaters, it will be similar strategies. You need to be a master of move blocking. We'll get to that. You need to be a master of identifying what you can kill with your units versus what you can't, and what you even need to try to kill in the first place. Because as fun as it is to do like our first combo here, to give yourself plus 2 inches of move, auto 6-inch advance, and advance and charge, and run straight at your opponent, that's not always what you need to do. And if you do need to do that, sometimes you don't need to go after the units you think you need to go after. 100%.
So tell me about these combos, Sean.
Well, like I said, this is the one. The first one, it's a very important one. It gives your opponent a lot to think about. And as I said, this is the one you're most familiar with, probably playing against World Eaters or with World Eaters. You give yourself the blessing for plus 2 inches of move. You give yourself the blessing for advance and charge, and then you pay a CP and give a unit a 6-inch advance. This is a powerful movement tool. Everyone knows this, but I wanted to bring it up for that first point. How you use this in a game will really dictate how good you are at World Eaters, because it's not just about running at them as fast as you can, although a lot of the time you do run at them as fast as you can. Then we move on. Then we move on to more of a enhancement character combo. Usually it's the Master of Execution with the Berserker Glaive. What this does is you're going to roll a dice when you get into combat, and he's just going to get it's a D3, and he's going to get that much more damage and strength added to his attacks. A damage 5 guy with precision and exploding sixes,
Yeah,
hitting on twos,
I was just about to say,
re-rolling.
character's not super excited to see him.
Oh man, it is just this guy is cheap, he is deadly, he is everything you want. Then you have the Lord on Juggernaut, who is more of a tougher character, and he's going to hold your Favoured of Khorne most of the time. Favoured of Khorne lets you re-roll all your Khorne blessing dice once per battle round. Very key there. As much as I like doing Angron Yahtzee just to pay the 1 CP and do the blessing as much as I can and try to re-roll it a bunch, they did for some reason change that. So it's just once per battle round. Keep that in mind as you're playing against World Eaters and with them. I know it doesn't say that if you're reading the original index cards like me and you just like have it and you're like, oh, this is so good. Once per battle round. And you can mix these around. A Berserker Glaive on a Lord on Juggernaut's not bad. Not probably as good as the Master of Executions for pure damage, but the Lord on Juggernaut is obviously a little bit faster.
Yeah, but the Master of Execution is cheap. That's what
so
Brad
cheap.
likes, baby.
Yeah, Brad's all about the trash and how cheap can you get it. Then this is more of a, unique thing you can do in World Eaters. You've got a Demon Prince with the enhancement to have damage, and then you've got stacks of 20 Jakhals. What does this do? Well, the Demon Prince on foot gives an invuln to the Jakhals, and the Jakhals naturally have a Feel No Pain. Well, if you use the Blessing for a Feel No Pain, it enhances the Jakhals' Feel No Pain they already have. So suddenly you have up to 120 bodies with the 4-up invuln and a 5-up Feel No Pain that just conveniently get all the other bonuses of being World Eaters. So extra strength, extra attacks, exploding sixes. And it's just as Manny Chima actually showed us at the London GT, turns out just having a 4-up invuln and a Feel No Pain on a zillion bodies, it's a real strategy.
True story. And the thing is it just makes those things really, really hard to deal with, especially standing on an objective, screening, wrapping something that wants to continue on. All of those things are legit.
Yeah, and that's going to be a big part of it. I think this list, while you probably won't see it very often because who's got time to paint 120 Jakhals? I think that it is actually pretty strong if you can get it on the table and master it. And it teaches you some real fundamentals you need to know with World Eaters. You're really stressed on how do I move on the table with all these crazy movement buffs and then stand where I need to. Not necessarily destroy everything, but stand where I need to. Moving on, we got this is one that I think a lot of the tournament World Eaters players were pushing towards at the beginning. I know that I put this in one of my faction videos on Dice with Rice. This is Angron plus Lord of Skulls. Why is this a combo per se? Because this is basically going to give Brad a 4th heart attack or whatever because it's like 1,200 points in
So
3 models. Yeah, Brad can't handle it. But for the rest of us, Angron can in the charge phase pick a bonus to give, and one of those is reroll all hits. Turns out Khorne Lord of Skulls has some really good guns, and I'm talking like crazy efficient high damage guns. And if you just put Angron next to them, they're like Imperial Knights, but better. And that sounds odd, but they really are, because they have efficient melee, they get access to advance and charge, they get access to the Feel No Pain blessing, just the same as Imperial Knights do for a 6-up Feel No Pain. And then when somebody charges you, you get to reroll all hits. That's a little silly. At least that's what you were doing. You can still do that, as you'll see in one of our lists. We do have more lists than usual. We're starting to kick that number up. And one of them does include Khorne Lord of Skulls. So if you're a big model enjoyer and you still want to run people angry, you totally can do that.
I thought of so many things to say for big model enjoyer. Let's talk about an effective list. There's things that you have to have in almost every list, and one of those things is, how are we scoring? Jakhals, Spawn, Rhinos. I love the lone Berserker. Sometimes when you have one guy survive, you don't try to jump into that combat. Just run away. I know it sounds crazy for Khorne, but just run and stand on something. Your opponent has to do something about it. After your Rhinos have unloaded their payload, Transports are wildly effective for scoring. Doing actions, getting in the way, move blocking, and scoring are just crazy. It's really, really big on that. Now, the fact that you can make an objective sticky is a big deal also, especially if your opponent has made mistakes, doesn't have any deep strikes, doesn't have any reserves. You can just go, cool, that's my objective. I'm going this way now. So that's a huge deal on this. And the army's identity to do all of this is melee pressure. It doesn't mean YOLO swag pressure. It can be sometimes YOLO swag pressure, but a lot of the times you are just telling your opponent, hey, move up and do something about the fact that I'm sitting on 3 objectives. And if you get close enough, I'm going to beat the crap out of you. As usual, event rulings, terrain format missions. What should we look out for? How about what kind of rulings are we looking for right now?
So the one very particular one is you probably need to ask your TO if Lord Invocatus can attach to a unit of Berserkers, 8-bound, what have you, and give them the scout move. Now, currently how it works is Invocatus himself has a scout move, and then he has the ability to give 2 World Eaters infantry units scout. How the rules work is just because one model in your unit has scout does not necessarily mean the whole unit has it. In fact, it specifically says you don't get your scout move if you are attached. But there's a little bit of confusion on can Invocatus just attach to a unit and then give himself a scout move so that every unit or every model in his unit has a scout move or not. And you need to know that because that really influences whether you want to take Invocatus or not. The power behind him is obviously you can deploy very close to the line and threaten your opponent to deploy a little back. And then if you don't go first, just go backwards with your scout move. You absolutely have that option. Second is, as we say in the last deal with it, if you were playing on player-based terrain, shooting is a lot better. And if you're a World Eaters player, you really don't want to see a lot of shooting on the other side of the table and open fire lanes. So consider that when you're building your list if you know you're going to play on player-placed terrain.
100% on that. Well, let's talk about that. Let's go through the preparation. Let's go through the 5-step plan to destroying the world, freeing the gladiators, and moving on with your life. Screw you, Emperor. You should have waited that 11 minutes that it would have taken to free all his friends. Maybe Angron wouldn't have been so crazy. He's kind of... Well, preparation, my big deal. You got to know all of your combos inside and out. You really need to know what your options are. And that's one of the things that we'll talk about in practice and everything. But you have to prepare yourself by just knowing your rules. Because knowing everything that you can do will give you that suite of things to dig out of when you're talking about, in game. So it's a big deal. Again, scout with Lord Invocatus. Give me some strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, and we moved some of the deal with it slides around just so we could give like an outline of where we're going. I know a lot of people like to skip around on the timestamps we give later, and this is just one way where you can kind of get an overview and jump to it later. So for everybody else watching, this is kind of your little guide of what's there. Some strengths and weaknesses. Violence is definitely the answer here. A lot of the time, you are going to focus on being quick. You're going to focus on being scrappy. And you're going to bring a ton of units usually. Now, yes, you can bring Angron. He's a lot of points, but he does a whole lot of things. He forces your opponent to deal with him. He moves really quick to the line, and he puts out a ton of damage once he gets there. So that kind of embodies what you want to be doing as World Eaters, and that's their strength. Downsides, we'll get to right after this slide. You're going to have a lot of volume. But you're not particularly going to have a lot of quality attacks. Yes, we talked about the Master of Executions, and we're talking about Angron. Those are 2 standouts. For the most part, you're going to be AP1, AP2, and 5 to 6 strength, potentially going up to 6 and 7. Then, as we just mentioned, the threat of where you can be is a huge strength of World Eaters. And just telling your opponent that is a lot of benefit to you when you play it. But remember, it's not about actually getting there and doing crazy damage. It's getting there and doing something meaningful, and that's not always damage.
True story. Go through, just run us through the 5 because I want to go into the specifics once I get to the next slide. Then I start going on.
right?
You're in charge of the overview.
All right, then we're going to make a plan. Total violence is an option, yes, but knowing when and how to do it is going to be key to our plan. You can take a more fixed approach to the game where you just say, I'm going to kill your characters, I'm going to put a unit in the middle and deploy teleport homers every turn, or I'm going to shove that one lone Berserker that lives in your deployment zone with a plus 2 inches of move and advancing, or not advancing, just getting him in there after he's already been in there. But because you're taking so many different units and you are very fast, you can do tactical very well. So either one is an option depending on who you're playing against. Then we're going to start practicing. We're going to practice projecting that threat. Telling your opponent where you can be, as I said before, is a huge deal when playing World Eaters. You have a huge threat range that you can threaten at any point in the game. It's not about what you kill every time. It's about where you can stand. And as Brad said, you pick up the trash. If a lot of games are going to come down to, can you remove all of their scoring pieces before they can even do anything? And that's going to be a huge path to victory.
It's a big
and then
deal.
finally,
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, it's just one of those things where you have to make that, I like to say that sheet. You have to make that pros con all the time, because there's a lot of times when you're going to take out the trash and then you're going to also try to corral your opponent. And you always have to ask yourself, what is the benefit? What is the losing that unit for the rest of the game? What am I losing in points? Or what am I gaining for that move block for keeping my opponent off objectives? So you do have to make that decision each and every turn.
Right, and that leads into how we're making adjustments to our list. You don't have to go with the list that everyone tells you. Your list can be different from any of the 4 lists we're going to provide today. But the overarching point here is you can be violent, you can be very aggressive, but you don't have to do it and be dumb. You can be smart about how you do it and still be that aggressive.
Do smart, mindless aggression. Let's go into the strengths and weaknesses.
All right, good cop, give it to us.
I know. We knew that was happening. Strengths, advance and charge, +2 to move blessing, blood surge. This movie is literally the movie. This army is the Ricky Bobby of 40K. Want to go fast. You have a surprising amount of movement, especially with those scout moves. A lot of opponents don't understand the distance and they will leave you holes. The better part, a lot of times, isn't people making mistakes, though. One of the biggest strengths is your threat projection, because people have to respect that. You can win games in deployment by, exactly, I'm going to go Paul with the $2 super chat. Butcher's nails sing. Exactly. But your threat projection, you can win a game in deployment just by the fact that you can go, hey, I can scout, I can do this, I can go this fast, and your opponent pulls everything back, and then you just kind of go into the middle and hide behind terrain until they get close to you. You have all the objectives, you have the ability to take the board, score all of your secondaries, and they can't do anything, and all of a sudden you have a wild lead in the game. Their scoring ability with that, sticky objectives, the mobility, the horde of bodies, you can just, especially, you can double up, because I say it all the time, that 40K is a snowball game where a mistake is made, and because of that mistake, you start dominating the board for the entire game. And then all of a sudden, you didn't throw your screens up there because your opponent deployed so defensively. And now when they start to try to move out, you grab everything and hold them. You don't even have to do that much damage. You just tell them, no, bad army, you stay off the objectives. They're mine. And they don't score any secondary, and you run away with the primary. And then if you do that for a few turns, it doesn't even matter what happens after that. You can then YOLO swag up and punch everybody because you're now winning by 40, 50 points.
Exactly. And as we'll get to when we talk about practice, that's what Brad is describing is called slowing down the game. You want to delay that big all-in push until your opponent finally doesn't have time anymore to deal with it. They don't have time to score. They don't have time to destroy your units. And if they do, it's not going to be enough to matter.
All right, bad cop, tell me the bad things.
Yeah, well, much like orcs, turns out a 2-up save in Armor of Contempt is really bad for the World Eaters. And you may say, well, Angron's AP 6 million and damage 1 million. Yeah, but Angron is not every unit in your army. Even that Master of Executions with all that damage Still AP2. Not great. So when you're playing with World Eaters, know that is one of your limitations. If you see that big block of Terminators, if you see that Redemptor Dreadnought, keep in mind how you're dealing with it, because it's not just throwing 3 units straight at it and just hoping they don't roll their saves. Then this is one that is less obvious, but more when you're playing against World Eaters, the measuring tape. You get to measure exactly where they are. They do not have scary shooting unless they brought a Khorne Lord of Skulls. And as you see the next point, that's kind of what the asterisk is for. If they didn't bring a Lord of Skulls, you can pretty much stand in the open. I am not afraid of the plasma pistols on their Berzerkers. I'm not afraid of a few shots from a Demon Prince. I'm not afraid of a combi bolter on a Rhino. So if I'm playing against World Eaters, I'm just going to stand in the open and measure where you can be. Now, the benefit of having that big mobility is obviously your opponent has to measure much further than they want to. But at any point in the game, your opponent can just basically ignore one phase of the game and focus on the movement and charge phase like you are. And sometimes that puts you in some weird positions.
100% on that. We're going to go to the wall real quick. Garrett coming in with $5 super chat. I've been playing Angron, Lord Avocado, Demon Prince on foot with Favor of Khorne, 3x3 8-pound, 2x6 Exalted 8-pound, 30 Jakhals, 8-0 at the moment, not Frooper, but fun and okay. It is a fun army, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah. I have definitely had some of the most fun playing World Eaters, honestly, just getting them on the table and learning them. Honestly, it probably is second to Grey Knights. I gotta say second to Grey Knights. Everyone on this channel knows I love Grey Knights. They're so much fun to play. But World Eaters just being able to go wherever they want at any time, so great. And in your list specifically, it sounds like you do like balling up around that Demon Prince and just saying, I'm taking the middle, and then I'm going to run at you. And you're just going to have to deal with me. And that sounds awesome.
Let's talk about making this plan, because the World Eaters, for me, are one of the armies, and I've always been on this philosophy, that I heavily lean into the strengths instead of trying to mitigate the weaknesses. I will play around the weaknesses of it. I want bodies, I want speed, I want to be able to really take the ability for my opponent to score points early. This is a very early going army, and it doesn't have to be on top of you early. It's I can start scoring early and denying early. There's a lot of games where I'd love for the Khorne, the World Eaters, to not even be in engagements for the first couple turns. It's just that my opponent turtled up and then I screen something and I'm getting that big point lead early. And I cannot stress enough that it's very important for the World Eaters to be playing at least even, I prefer to be up in points, because a lot of times, depending on the boards, whether it's player pace and stuff, you will start to take a lot of casualties. So I want 1 or 2 turns of big engagements, but I want the entire game for me to be running that score up the entire time.
Yeah, and that's a big part of making the plan, as I said earlier, is yes, you do have the option to go aggressive against an army that can't quite, take you down as fast. For example, like Sisters. You can go very aggressive. You can take Assassinate and deploy Teleport Homers. You can push up on them very quickly, engage a bunch of their units, and just have this pillow fight for 2-3 turns while you rack up the score. But as Brad said, and this is Brad's preferred way to play, you can take a bunch of bodies and then just use that blessing for extra movement to just score out of your mind for the first 2 turns as every unit in your army runs around and controls the entire board. So usually it's I prefer tactical. I think it's more fun, but there is definitely a case to be made for, in some matchups, like Sisters, to just take Assassinate, deploy Teleport Homers, and run at them.
I think that World Eaters are fantastic at if you build for it, of course, but I think they're amazing at tactical. They're just, because they can get the board so fast, you can just score anything, it feels like. People have to really respect some of your pieces, like Angron. I mean, he is a distraction piece, but man, if you're not distracted at the Angry Ron and he starts touching things, that's bad news bears.
Yeah, and one thing that I see people really like poo-poo on Angron is like, yeah, he's a lot of points, and then I'm just not going to shoot at him. How I personally do it, and I think this is right, wherever you have Angron on the board, just push him right at your opponent's mass of bodies. Basically what that does is you tell your opponent, hey, you must deal with him. And as we get into the practice, you're going to have to practice how many activations your opponent gets. What does that mean? If your opponent has a unit, it can activate once for the shooting phase and once for the fight phase. Well, if it takes 8 activations to kill Angron, and your opponent only has 8 activations, it doesn't matter if your army is standing in the open. They can either try to pick off your army and then die to Angron, who's standing right in front of them, or they can just put it all in Angron. And you want to be giving your opponent that choice every single turn, especially if you're going to start bringing him back with Favoured to Khorne.
Get that lucky, baby. I love the fact that Avocado opens up your play to go full aggressive. And I love the threat of that, to be honest. It just lets you tell your opponent, I can do this. So again, force them to make bad plays, which makes your plays much easier to make. Master of Execution, that dude's so insanely deadly for his cost. He's one of the best models for points per attack in the entire game. So Terminators are giving you a little bit of mixed durability in melee. I mean, it's nice on that. I love the Shaun of the Rhinos because, you know, transports, you have to make it there somehow. Exalted Ace Spawn are one of the keys to this army, to be honest with you, because the big strength weapons make your opponent fear you with their tanks and things in ways that a lot of the rest of your army isn't able to do. So I think that they're a key piece, for sure. Jakhals, I love Jakhals. One of my favorite things about Jakhals is the fact that not only are they weirdly durable if you make them that way, but they hit so much harder than everyone else's trash does. In a trash on trash fight, Jakhals will ruin your soul. And that's important to know because a lot of times you can get Jakhals into other people's trash. And sometimes, especially with those larger units, you can really trade up. You can grab a couple of their trash units. I'm super willing to take Jakhals, push them out, and touch multiple things of my opponents and watch them be wildly surprised at how many attacks? What did that guy have? How many of those do you have in that unit? Yeah, it's nice.
And even the swing back, as we said, if you want to go ahead and use the Khorne Blessing for a Feel No Pain, they just have some kind of defense. The fact that your 70-point trash slaying unit has some defense means you're going to be left with 1 or 2 guys left after they've taken a unit down. And then they're going to walk to the middle and deploy teleport homers. They're going to walk over and score behind enemy lines. They're just going to get to do more.
Yeah. In Berserkers, I love it because cheap volume of attacks, OC2 body. That's a big deal. Sometimes you're jumping out of that Rhino, you're picking some stuff up, and a lot of times you're just straight taking the objective away, even if you didn't clear everything else off, because you've got a great amount of OC for a small amount of bodies. And then Chaos Spawn, come on now. Fantastic. Literally, you need units like this in your army to be the guys that go out and get in the way a lot of times. Hey, you know what'd be cool? If I didn't have 6 crisis teams jumping right on top of me. Let's push those guys back a little bit. Move that rapid ingress back. Give your opponent a pushback. Don't let them set up exactly where they want to. That's hugely important.
100%.
Practice. I cannot stress, we say this all the time, the 2 top things on it, but you have to do it. Be time efficient. Communicate with your practice partner. You want to figure out what are the best things to do. What is my best plays? How is my deployment? Am I too aggressive? Should I have been way more aggressive? I can't be too passive. I have to get that passive aggressive is what I like to call it. But it's important to keep doing that over every move. Because as the world leaders, I don't know if there's another army that snowballs more than they do. Maybe Tau with their move shoot stuff. But you can either really flip the game in your favor or really start losing the game, depending on where you are. So it's important for me in your practice. I practice like this all the time anyways, but I think it's a big deal, especially in World Eaters, is because you have to figure out what is the most optimum move. Because of the fact that you're doing 90% of your damage up close and personal, you want to be in those perfect positions, and you're going to learn how to get to those perfect positions by talking through that with your practice partner.
Yeah, and that's kind of how we move into this first part of how you actually should practice once you've got that practice partner. Knowing when to go all out versus to drip feed your opponent models. Usually we talk about drip feeding your opponent's models in a negative term, but with World Eater specifically, the fact that you have a 1 CP stratagem to just say, oh no, my unit died in objective. It's sticky. It's mine now. That is a huge reason for you to be okay slowing down the game and just saying, hey, you have to come to me. You have to give me those jumping points to leap into your army. What do I mean by that? You walk up with some Jakhals. They're out of line of sight. Your opponent either has to move up and charge them. Great. I get to countercharge and be on that objective with another unit. Or they have to shoot them off. If they shoot them off, 1 CP, objective is sticky. I have the objective, I score my primary. That's a win-win scenario for you. If you know you can set that up against somebody, there's no reason to run at them full speed. On the flip side.
And there's a big thing on this, especially with, as I flipped to the wrong slide accidentally. Whoopsie. But one of the biggest things about when you're playing this is know what the mission is, because you're going to play different for each one, especially either mission and your type of deployments on. If I'm playing Hammer and Anvil, if I'm playing Dawn of War with 3 objectives in the middle, well, I don't need to go to my opponent. They have to come to me. I can just sit down, especially if you're playing GW, depending on the GW set, but, player place terrain, you're going to be able to just park on 2 objectives and just hang out in the middle, just hide from your opponent and go, feel free to come over here and do something about this. I don't have to extend you. If you'd like to sit on 1 objective the entire game and not score secondaries, great. I will win a very boring game. But what that also does is it conserves units for later in the game. Because I want those 1 or 2 big turns. I don't want small turns all the time, because I'm probably not going to win small turns all the time, because I have to actually cover area to get to you. So I want to hit hard, and I want to hit there not often. I want to hit hard and then do nothing.
Right, and that's even more important. In fact, there's, I believe it's priority targets where you score 5 points per objective you hold, up to 10 per turn. So what this means is if you're going to play against that as a primary denial army like World Eaters is, or even like Orcs is, it's going to be very hard to hold them to little primary for 3 turns in a row. Instead, it's better to trade, and then finally on turns 4 and 5, hit them as hard as you can, so that hopefully by the end of it, you're the one on top at the end of the game to score primary. Because at the end of the game in that one, you score 5 per objective you hold per player. So that's a huge reason to drip feed a little bit and then hit them when it counts.
It's gigantic. And you can make such a big flip at the end of the game on that too. So it's huge. And you really do have to practice whether you want to push basically all out versus tactical. And that's going to go, again, by army, by mission. You might have a wildly different mission, or different outlook of what you're trying to do versus Guard, a shooting army, on Hammer and Anvil than you would versus maybe Crucible, because you have to cover more ground. You have to hit those neutral zone objectives harder, as opposed to a more static game when you're playing a Hammer and Anvil or Dawn of War. So those are going to change. That's why it's really nice to practice and get those reps in. But again, talk through. No one has enough time to play every single game versus every single faction on every single mission.
Yeah, and that's a big point. I'm actually going to lump the next 2 together. Picking off scoring units and mastering move blocking. You can kind of do these at the same time. I'm going to use Sisters as a good example because that's something where I feel like they have a lot of scoring units, so it should be theoretically harder to get rid of all of them. But in that case, the more bodies and more scoring units your opponent has, they have one of two options. They can spread out or they can bunch up. If they spread out, there are a whole bunch of small individual weak units that 5 Berserkers, 3 8-bound can pick off very easily. And you need to look at that and say, okay, I'm just going to go pick all of those up. I'm going to try to go 1-for-1 unit where your activations left in your army. You're going to have to decide if you want to move forward or if you want to try to go and score. You should be basically putting your opponent to the test every time you see that of what do you want to do? What are you doing now that I'm here and your scoring units are gone? Move blocking, the hardest, what I have heard, I don't actually believe this, and I know Brad doesn't either, is that knights are hard to move block because they can walk over you. You can move block every single army. It's not close. There is not an army I cannot move block. It is one of the most fundamental Warhammer skills to learn. And world leaders can do this. When you are fast, you are aggressive, you aren't afraid to charge, you can move block better than anybody. You know, Eldar, masters of mobility, okay at move blocking. They don't really want to be standing in front of you. That's not their shtick. World leaders, I'm going to stand in front of you and scream at you until you shoot me. That's a great strategy for world leaders. How do you actually do it?
You know what they wish they had? Thunder of Cad led by Logan Grimnar. Love it, Peaches. Yes. What's the plan? Put the plan, again, you have to do your nerd sheet. You got to get your Excel sheet out because you want to put baby in the corner if they let you. Otherwise, you're delaying. However, when you're going to putting baby in the corner, you have to make sure that you're able to put them in the corner long enough and that you're scoring enough, because putting baby in the corner will cost you a shit ton of units. So it's important that the investment gives you the return on that. So you're going to have to go, how am I move blocking? How much things do I want to touch? Is it just okay to just get in the way? Do I want to delay tactic, or am I actually looking to take the fight to them and put them in the corner? So you have to make those decisions, and that's what practice is for. And again, with that practice, you have to talk with your opponent about what isn't working for you. You can lose 1,000,000 practice games and learn so much, and you can win 1,000,000 practice games and learn absolutely nothing. It's important to figure out what were the things that were working for you, not just for yourself, but ask your opponent, basically, what moves did I make that were really hard for it? What was my unit efficiency for you when you were shooting? You were taking your target priorities. And then you can start to judge from those experiences. I'll ask Sean, hey, what did you think about this? You know, these specters, these, for world leaders, you know, how did the Exalted work? I put a Helldrake in there. I put, you know, something off. Did this give me enough value for the points? In the end, you want efficiency of points to make yourself the best at it. And that goes into making adjustments. So you're going to talk through with your practice partners and yourself and start to figure out those adjustments that you can make. And we're going to say this every time for this. Don't just grab the top winning roster. That might not be the best thing for yourself, because it might not have the key pieces of the way that you like to play the game. Maybe you like Horde. Maybe you like big models. You know, don't take the army that doesn't play as well. You don't like trash as much as me, definitely don't take my army, because it's always going to be full of trash. If you want big models, you're definitely not taking mine, because I almost never have a lot of big models in it. So I love the Yahtzee Pro, but the thing is that you want to play your style, but be the most efficient with your style. So when you feel you're struggling as world leaders, you come in and you're going to aggressives. All my models are gone. You have to. With great violent urges comes great responsibility. Setting up is such a big deal. There's so much to be said for the threat of units is a lot of times more deadly than the actual thing that the unit can do. Because if I still have things available to go at him, Sean has to keep respecting what he puts out. When he comes over to shoot me, I cut those angles up. I've been hiding behind the terrain. I've been scoring. Every time he does something, I want him to pay for that, which means that you need to make I know I may have said this once or twice, pre-measure, pre-measure, pre-measure. When someone gets shots on me, I want them to be in a spot that they're shooting that they're really uncomfortable with being there, because they're going to kill something, but they are now in assault range, or they're off of an objective. I want to pull them away, which means that you have to pre-measure all those angles. You can't stop all of the shots, but you can mitigate most of the shots. And that's a big deal on that. So you have to look at that. Now, go into the Terminators on the Sean.
So one of the big things that I see world leaders do often is you just see a unit and you're like, oh, it's tough. I'm throwing 3 more units into it. It'll be fine. And then suddenly they're still standing there and they're like, huh, I lost the game. That's not good. What do I do? Well, I mean, the answer, we've been saying it over and over again. You got to know what you can take down versus what you need to deal with alternate ways. Just stand in front of them. You know what Terminators hate? They hate just Jakhals making a little ring around them. Nobody wants to shoot Jakhals. They've got Angron in their face. They've got a Master of Executions with potentially damage 5 attacks. Nobody wants to have to shoot these Jakhals to get through. Well, just do that. Do that over and over again. That makes someone very, very sad, because they either have to shoot the Jakhals or they have to charge the Jakhals, and then more Jakhals take their place.
And especially with the way that the movement after assault works. I can't kill these Terminators right now. Cool, don't. As long as they're not within the ability to consolidate or into an objective or a new unit, they're not going anywhere. They have to make base to base with you, so they can't stretch way out. So just stand in front of them and just wave and go, that's a tomorrow, Brad, problem. I'll take care of that later.
Yeah, Brad makes a good point. When you have these bigger models, and bigger unit sizes, 10, this isn't just a 5-man trash unit. We got 10 guys here. If you throw them all in the line in front of them and they want to charge, they've got to be base to base if they can. There are some tricks that players can do to get around that kind of, but not if you got 10 guys in a line. You're going to have to get base to base with all your models, and then you're just going to be standing there, because you're probably not going to be able to get to an objective if I wasn't on an objective.
100% on that. Infiltrating units keep ruining my day. That's one of the biggest things. Slow the game down. Kill those units. Take free kills. Especially when you get into games like, I don't know, Purge the Foe. Thanks for the free kill. I'll take my 8-0 on turn 1. I will take my free movement to set up in that perfect place on the board. Hit them with your trash too. Get that extra movement, especially if you can end that movement on your side of a wall. Oh, so good. It's just one of those things where you have to know to play for later in the game. And the thing is don't think, that's not World Leader style. Think about it as, I can make a bigger, more deadly, bloodier charge later in the game because I have more shit. And you know what feels great? Making a multi-charge on turn 3, 4, or 5, where you're hitting all of their expensive units, not all of their trash units. Nothing makes me happier than just touching all of their shooting units and going, come in for a big murder hug. Is that a word? It is now.
It is now. That's what you should take away from this. Murder hug. That is the world leader way.
Murder hug. Let's talk about some lists, my friend. We've got several. I do like that we're starting with all gas, no brakes.
Oh, yeah. And this is the best example of, this is a list that I like a lot. And usually we start with those because we want to give you an example of how we're taking what we're saying and putting it right to practice. So what does that look like? I want Angron. I want to throw him at my opponent as fast as possible. I want to be so annoying with this Angron that they have to deal with him. And then I'm going to forget about him. He's like a fire and forget missile. Angry Ron is coming to town, and he's coming to your side of the table, not mine.
And fast. So much deceptively faster than you think he is.
So fast. He's so fast. I use the advance in charge and auto 6 on him, and I just say, here, have him. I don't want it anymore. He's too angry for me. Then you have Khârn. Khârn is going to go with the 10 Berserkers and a Rhino. This is a great little combo to just deal a ton of damage quickly when you need to get that extra 3-inch movement when you disembark. Additionally, Khârn's not going to just start like getting angry that he's not in combat if he's just hanging out on the board and just killing 2 of your guys for no reason. So putting him in a Rhino completely takes out that possibility. Then we have Lord Invocatus. As we talked about, you can be aggressive with your units. You can deploy on the line and then measure where they can go 6 inches backwards to be hidden. And if you go second, just hide them. If you go first, you get the opportunity to go right into them if you need to go right into them. Then we've got our guys that hold our great enhancements. You got Favoured Khorne on the Lord on Juggernaut. He has the option to go with a small unit of Berserkers outside a Rhino or to go in a Rhino. If usually that'd be if they have indirect or don't have indirect. And he's just going to let me fish for Angron after they deal with him. If they never deal with him, awesome. He's just going to hold a back objective. If they do deal with him, my opponent now needs to be afraid every time I'm rolling Khorne dice that suddenly Angron's going to rapid ingress in back at them.
And it's a big deal, especially if you've kept them in that box. Oh, Angron becomes just a nightmare for your opponent, especially if you can rapid ingress him behind something, they can't see him. You kept them very boxed in. Whew, no bueno.
Exactly, and you're just going to be stuck there. Master of Executions, as Brad said, he's one of the cheapest, massive upside damage dealing units you can take. That is an auto take for me. If you're cheap and you deal a ton of damage, I want you in my World Eater's army. You got your 10 basic Jakhals for exactly what we talked about. They're going to sticky something. They're going to sticky something when they die. They're going to hold in icons to let me re-roll, to keep trying to fish to bring Angron back. Same deal. 2 5-man Berserkers and a separate Rhino. This is my slow the game down piece if I need to. I'm just going to park this Rhino near the middle, and I'm just going to try to trade with you. 5 Berserkers, and then all in. And you're still going to have to deal with Angron.
And they pick up trash fantastically.
Exactly. 10 Terminators, this is the beef. Where's the beef? This is the beef. This is my turn 5 push on priority targets. This is my you're a guard army and suddenly here's these Terminators. I just like having that one actually tough unit to throw at somebody. And then of course 2 Chaos Spawn.
And then you've got the Brad Spawn.
Yeah, these are the Brad Spawn. Just only refer to them as Brad Spawn from now on. It would make me so happy.
Let's talk about Bernard's list. Where a lot of the same things, but he took a little bit more shooting and a little bit less just beefcake, to be honest with you. He took the 5 Terminators. He's got 5 Flesh Hounds trying to cover some space. And the biggest difference is double Forge Fiend. He just wanted a little bit of reach out and touch someone. Did very well. He's got a lot of the same keys. He did not take Invocatus, so he's playing more of a setup game, which I like. Just super solid list on that.
Yeah, if you're going to take Forge Fiends, this is the way to do it. You play that drip feed game, and suddenly you have shooting. Nobody expects World Eaters to have damage 3 shooting out of left field. Forge Fiends are cheap if they're not in CSM. And
ridiculous.
This is no exception. Yeah.
So I like this list quite a bit. I want to compare this to the Darth list on it, because this is bringing a lot more bros to the table. With 10 World Eater Terminators, 9 Exalted 8-bound, the Rhino for the Berserkers, 5x5, 2 5x5s, 2 units of 10 Berserkers, and then kind of the Khârn, Invocatus, Demon Bristled Wings, Master of Execution, no Angry Ron. This is really board-centric, lots of infantry.
Yeah, this is, I believe, the Red Path. I believe that's Dara Mihan. And obviously loves World Eaters to death. This is clearly somebody who is trying to emphasize playing the mission, not just throwing Angron at them. And I did want to shout out to him. I believe his list was titled, I Can't Believe It's Not Angron. I'm a fan of that. If you've seen either deal.
And the thing is that this is one of the things that I like about the World Eaters on this is, like, without Angron, this is still a fantastic list on this. You can really dig into trying to take the board. You're setting up behind terrain and just taking your objectives. I actually think this list plays really well into player place terrain, because you can just jam those the terrain right around the objectives, and it's a big deal. Matt, both actually. It just depends how you're playing it, because the World Eaters can feast on GW terrain because you have so many options of places to go, where you can go right through with Angron, for instance, or just drive your Rhino right through, because it sets us up for the ability to move. You have to look at the different terrain sets before you're designing your army, because we're talking about making adjustments all the time, and that's what you want to do with any army. But you're going to make those adjustments based on your practice. The adjustments are going to be based on also what tournament I'm going. What is the terrain set for that? So I like this quite a bit, especially if I get to choose where the engagements happen. Because there's nothing, if you're just sitting with Exalted 8-Bond on an objective and your opponent's an all-shooting army, they have no real desire to have to drive all the way around a Big L or any of those small ruins and try to dig you out, because again, they're getting touched by something they don't want to be touched by. So I'm going to go into Christian's. This has just happened too. Dragonfall 2023 over the weekend. You had Angron, Lord of Juggernaut, 10 Jakhals, 2 units of 3 8-pound, a unit of 3 Exalted 8-pound, and 2 Khorne Lord of Skulls.
Yeah, if you were a fan of big models, alive and well, you definitely can take some Khorne Lord of Skulls and keep on rocking.
So this is a very scary army, especially if you can play on certain GW sets, or you can just run right over all those 2-inch pieces. It's terrifying with Aegir out of the double, KLOS. Whoo! Like, this is nothing to shake a stick. This is not an army that I want to play, because it terrifies me that I have that many points in three units. But it's also something that's going to give you some palpitations on seeing it across the table from you.
Yeah, and it's almost hard to take a stance against double Khorne Lord of Skulls if you didn't bring enough firepower to deal with it. Towering, allowing them to be hidden now, suddenly they can hide, you play a little bit timid, and then they're advancing and charging at you over those 2-inch terrain pieces. And that is not what I want to see out of a towering model with AP yes, strength yes, damage yes, melee attacks.
And the thing is that no matter what army you're bringing, you have to bring a little bit. I want to compare and contrast these two World Eater armies. Any of the armies you're building, we're talking World Eaters today, but this applies to everything. You have to have enough volume to take care of a ton of bodies, and you have to have enough tank kill to take care of Khorne Lord of Skulls and Angron and stuff. So it's important to have a little bit of both in your army. So showcasing the Mian list versus Vale's list, it's really important to make sure that you're not all in on one type of damage, because you're not going to have those tools that you need in the other games.
Yeah, big thing anytime. I may add it to one of the slides, but big thing to remember every time is versatility in your army, where you can take it is awesome. Any army can pretty much go in any direction, and especially showing up at a tournament. You may not play Eldari every round. Shocking, we've moved on from those times. You may play against the guy who was taking 300 guardsmen in one round. And then suddenly, round 2, you run into Christian, and you've got 2 Lord of Skulls and Angron. That is requiring wildly different tools to deal with 100%. Appropriately.
And it's very difficult to make that. That's why practice. Make those small adjustments. Do not chase the meta. Be aware of the meta. If you chase the meta, and you're like, I am only going to play Lord of Skulls and Angron and Knights every game, and then you have a 5 or 6 game tournament, you go, I only play 200 plus models. So that's a big thing on that. Which is your favorite on this? Because I'm gonna let Sean promote himself a little bit and tell me his favorite list, and then I'm gonna call it a day.
I think for pure style, I love the double Khorne Lord of Skulls and Angron. That's hilarious. Personally, I do like all gas no breaks if I'm going to play it. If I'm going to play against it, I'm much more afraid of all gas no breaks. So that's where I'm going to stick with it. Also, if you're watching this later, I know we get a lot of viewers after the fact. You can catch us live every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Brad and I are going to be doing one of these for every faction. You can check them out on my channel, which is Dice with Rice 40K, and you can check them out here on the Death or Glory channel.
Love it. Usually I'd like to go over, but I'm going to take care of some stuffs. So, everyone, we appreciate you hanging out with us. We read the comments. Please tell us what you'd like to see, and we will take a look at it. You know what I mean? Improvements to everything. We might even let Sean have some internet later. Things of that nature. But until then, take it easy.